Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Fleet Geeks podcast. Today I'm going to, first of all, look very pretty in pink for those of you that are watching on YouTube. I've got a nice pink hoodie on today, channeling my inner feminine side. So obviously if you're listening on the podcast, you can't see, so it doesn't really matter. Nonetheless, if you're listening on the podcast, you're not missing out, right? Because there's nothing to see here anyway. I hope that you've enjoyed the recent podcasts that I've done. Recently, I've been doing lots of workshop audits for our clients, and there's been some interesting things that have gone on off the back of those. And what I thought I'd do is I get a lot of questions around what's included in a workshop audit. What do we look at? So to give you guys a bit more information, I thought I'd share my top 10 most common issues that I find during workshop audits when I do maintenance provider audits. I never know whether to call them workshop audits or maintenance provider audits, whatever. But I like to call them workshops. They're your workshops, right? And these could be internal workshops where you maintain your own vehicles, or it might be external subcontractors. But there's some common stuff. There's common stuff that I see. So let's start at number one, right? Because that's the best place to start. So 10 top things that are issues I find at workshop maintenance provider audits. The first is poor overall health and safety. Okay, so I've kind of combined, because I could have ended up with a big list, right? But poor overall health and safety. Now, workshops are pretty unsafe places where potentially there's a lot of risk for things to go wrong. And one of the things that I look for is to make sure that signage is safe, because ultimately, if you're sending your drivers to an external maintenance provider workshop, they need to be safe on the premises. So I look at signage, I look at training for the guys who work there, guys and girls that work there, and then I also look at communication around risk and risk assessments and making sure that the technicians are fully informed of their health and safety duties, their responsibilities, and also the documentation and availability of various things they need, as well as whether they adhere to those as well, and whether there's ongoing internal audits around safety. So I've kind of lumped that all into one. The first one is around poor overall health and safety. It's a common issue that I find, particularly around the communication of risk assessments, the communication of risk, and the overall training and induction of team members. The second issue that I find, numero 2 issue that I find, is a lack of O license awareness amongst the team who work in the workshops. Now, in my humble opinion, I think it's important that workshop staff understand why they're doing what they're doing. Obviously, they're making sure that vehicles are safe for the road, but they also need to understand how that fits into the larger ecosystem of operator licensing, the traffic commissioner, the DVSA, and of course OCRS and MOT pass rates. So fundamentally, I think the workshop team should have operator license awareness training. It doesn't need to be a full one-day OLAP, but I think they need to have some level of awareness of OCRS, the impact of an MOT failure, just so that they understand the impact on their customers. Because ultimately, the better the outcomes, the better the service will be provided if the people carrying out the work understand why they're doing it. Ultimately, really, really important. So in my opinion, that is something that workshops should be looking at around operator license awareness training, to raise the understanding of why safety inspections are so important. The third issue I find is incomplete service sheets. So I do service sheet sampling as part of the audit process, and what I will find is poor signing off of documentation, so missing signatures, particularly for manual paper-filled service sheets. I find missing signatures. I find defects that haven't got an inspection manual number. I'll find missing tyre pressures. I'll find inconsistent reading on tread depths. So tires apparently increase in depth. I'll find that there's been no sign off of defects. So defects have been notified, and then there's no sign off, there's no follow up, there's no notification. And I'll also look at how long it takes for the workshop to notify the operator of the vehicle roadworthiness and obviously the return of those inspection sheets. So again, I've lumped in a few issues into one, but overall service sheet completeness is a challenge in at number 3. At number 4, an overall lack of communication between workshop team members and management is often an issue, particularly around tester's manual guide to maintaining roadworthiness. I'll often find that there's not the most recent version available to technicians, that they're not really aware of the demands on them to have a good understanding of those.
Hello, it's Shani from Flagship Partners. We are really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. If you need expert advice or training for your fleet business, make Flagship Partners your first choice. We are really excited to announce the launch of our Transport Manager Academy. With expert development for fleet leaders, we offer fully accredited initial Transport Manager CPC training, CPC refresher, and operator license awareness training, as well as mentoring, support, and professional. Our vision is to develop elite fleet professionals.
Particularly the different changes and what's changed from time to time, which again, in my humble opinion, I think is important to make sure we communicate any changes within a workshop environment around those things. In at number 5 is tooling. So I find some issues with tooling often. So best practice is to have a good inventory of tooling, in particular around service and breakdown vans. I find a common issue. So workshops often don't provide tooling for the service vehicles, so the technicians have to take their own. I'll often find hidden bits of equipment or broken tools or torque wrenches that are out of calibration. I might find that there's Lolas missing. I might find there's a compressor just put in the corner that hasn't had any pressure testing, just in case the compressor breaks down at some point. So lots of issues often I find around tooling and challenges for those sorts of things, because again, there's health and safety issues there, but there's also quality and maintenance issues as well. Ultimately, we don't want a vehicle breaking down and an uncalibrated torque wrench being used on one of our wheels, and a failure to follow proper torque process. So that's in at number 5. In at number 6 is training, particularly around inspection training. So Irtec, others are available. Obviously, some companies will do in-house inspection training, but generally speaking, poor quality training documentation. So there'll be technicians working in the workshop that will have often there'll be time served technicians, which is fine in my opinion. But I do think that we need to have some record of training. We need to have some record of competence checks. Because whilst guys who haven't got City and Guilds and MVQs and the such like, we do need to have some level of documentation sign off to demonstrate that they're competent at what they do. So whether they're competent or not, we do need to have some documentation around that. We need to have some documentation around training. And I thoroughly recommend a 5-yearly Irtec to many of the workshops I go and visit, because it gives that independent check on the people that are carrying out the work in your workshop. So that is number 6 for me. Number 7, again, is training related, but slightly different this time. So one of the things I find is that breakdown technicians who go out in the van to work on site or roadside elsewhere, they're not properly trained to do so. Now that's one of the riskiest, most challenging things that the workshop technicians will do. And I think it's important that they get proper training and proper training to work at the roadside. It's a dangerous gig, and I think that's an important thing for workshops to recognise, to make sure that only technicians who have been properly trained and are competent to do so are out working on the roadside and in people's yards as well. We need to make sure that people are trained competently to go and work out in the field, so to speak, because there's a lot of risks and things that happen in the working environment when they're away from the workshop that could pose them and others risks as well. So breakdown. That's number 7 for me. Number 8 is around the quality assurance process. So, and what I mean by that is, are supervisors really supervising the technicians, and is there a thorough documented process? Is there evidence to demonstrate that quality assurance process? And this really falls on the lack of evidence around it. How do we evidence that we're properly managing and supervising those workshop technicians, that we're signing off documentation with properly checking work that's been carried out? I think there's some work to do there in many of the workshops that I visit, and it's often a recommendation from me. 9 is around the MOT process, around the testing process. So do we have a double check MOT process? How important do we place our MOT pass rate? Is it a KPI, as in a key performance indicator, that is communicated throughout the workshop environment, so all technicians know the vital importance of achieving a first time MOT pass, but also the impact that it has on their customers and their clients? So MOT test process, how does that work? Do the drivers, the people who take vehicles to test, do they have the ability to carry out on-lane repairs to try and avoid failures? For example, a bulb here and a tightening up there. Have they got a little toolkit that they take with them? I always recommend that that's a good process to consider. And do they build relationships with the DVSA testers to build trust and those kinds of things? So MOT test process, do we have a strategy around that? How do we make that work? How does that happen? And in at number 10, finally, is lack of investigations into failure. So this includes MOT failures. So do we properly investigate MOT failures? Do we understand what went wrong? And do we put preventative measures in place? But also mechanical failures in between service, for example, repairs that need carrying out in between inspections. Are we understanding why they didn't get defected and repaired at the time of inspection? That is one of the things that I look to pick up on. I look to pick up on defects that are picked up on inspections. Have they deteriorated over a period of time, or have they been missing? Have they been picked up at one point and then missed several inspections, then reappeared somewhere else? So that's in at number 10, around lack of investigations into failure. So to give you guys a bit of a rundown again, number 1, poor overall health and safety. 2, lack of O license awareness. 3 is around service sheet incompletion. 4 is around lack of comms around different regulatory changes. Number 4 is tooling and issues around service vans, in particular, broken tools, inventory for tools, those kinds of things, making sure they're properly calibrated and loaded. 6 is training, inspection training around Irtec and certification of training. And 7 is also around training, but this time around breakdown in particular, and working away from the workshop premises. Number 8 is quality assurance and the supervision process, and making sure that that's properly evidenced. At number 9, it's the MOT test process. How does that work? How do we avoid failure? How do we set ourselves up for success to ensure that MOTs are passed first time? And number 10 is around a lack of investigation into failure, particularly mechanical failure, but also failure around MOTs, and properly investigating those too. I hope this podcast has been useful. That has maybe given you some tips to look out for, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. I'll see you again on the next one. Take care now. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.